Kim Dwyer. I am a clinical psychologist, author, and business consultant, and you're here with us for Mindful Moments. So thanks so much for joining us tonight, or if you're catching the replay, thanks for being here and listening. We are so excited tonight to talk about the connections between mindfulness and authenticity, and I am delighted to welcome my friend and colleague, Dawn Gabriel. Dawn is an LPC and founder and CEO of Authentic Connections Counseling Center in Castle Rock, Colorado. She has over 15 years of experience in the clinical mental health world. Dawn also hosts the Faith Fringes podcast, where she creates an engaging space for spiritual explorers who value curiosity and judgment-free connection with God outside of traditional norms. She also offers soul care days in Colorado and soul care for therapist retreats nationwide. So thank you, Dawn, for being here, and welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, Kim.
Yeah. So let's maybe start. We'll just share a little bit about ourselves and kind of why we're having these conversations. I already shared a little bit. I'm a clinical psychologist. I also support mental health providers launching, growing, and redefining their practices. I'm also an author, and Mindful Mondays just launched yesterday, which is a book that I wrote to help people find simple and accessible strategies that they can use on an everyday basis. They can use them on the fly, when you don't have 30 minutes to sit on your meditation cushion, but just need a moment to reconnect throughout your day. And we're using these mindful moment conversations to talk about how we can connect mindfulness to different aspects of life. So that's a little bit about why we're here tonight. So Dawn, why don't you share a little bit about your work?
Yeah, so I also am a licensed professional counselor, and I've done that for 15 years. And I also own a group practice with 9 other therapists. I love my team. And recently, in the last year, I started a podcast called Faith Fringes, as Kim said. And I am just really passionate about working with people and helping them connect to God, but not with like a religious checklist. I like to kind of broaden and do some edge work around spirituality. And yeah, just really excited about that. I also just love what you're doing, Kim. I think it's so important to like break down mindfulness into like really practical small steps. And I feel like that's what your book is doing. And I'm so excited to talk about it. And really, like, it's just like a deep dive, but then there's some simple practical stuff you can apply. So I'm excited today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, maybe we should start right there and just kind of talk about the topic of authenticity and mindfulness and how those, converge and support one another. And I'm sure as we just talk about this, we'll just go where it takes us. So.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we don't have that problem, Kim.
No.
We will talk.
We will keep talking, right?
Yeah.
We'll find stuff. So yeah, and what I often think about, in terms of, this is such a big topic. I'm trying to get to the biggest takeaways of it. But I think one of the things that mindfulness, so if we define mindfulness as present moment awareness without judgment, when we come back to the present moment and experience our world, like our external world and our internal world, without judgment. Like, it's the judgment piece that so often gets us into trouble. So when we can come back to the present moment and experience sensory information, we can experience thought information, we can experience emotional information, emotional states. And when we do that through a mindful lens, which is often curiosity and, being a curious observer of that experience, I do think that all those pieces, but especially our emotional experience, can tell us a lot about what's most important to us and what our values are. And I think that's where authenticity comes in. Like, once you reconnect to that, that inner part of you, whatever you want to call it, soul, spirit, maybe you call it something in more secular terms than that, but guiding principles, morals, moral compass, whatever that is. If you can use your emotions to help you like kind of lens into those values and see them more clearly, then it can guide, like, what decision do I want to make? What behavior do I want to engage in? How do I want to show up in this situation? As opposed to, I have this strong emotion and it's really scary or it's really uncomfortable and I'm gonna get rid of it, which we do a really good job at that in our society, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were saying that, I feel like we, at least I feel like society has cultivated a place of, yeah, just ignore emotions. They're not important, or you're too emotional. And not really. Like, I work with people all the time, and I feel like emotional intelligence is like
Oh my gosh.
key to life, and learning to embrace that. I mean, look at all of Brene Brown's work, right? It's really
Right.
about being mindful of what's going on emotionally. And she goes off on the shame a lot, but but really it's like creating space for you to just, first of all, just allow that
Yeah.
to happen, and just be okay with it and just notice. And I love what you said, without judgment. That is the key, because
Mhm.
usually in our minds we're like, I can notice this and that's bad.
Yeah.
Like, we judge it instead
Yeah.
of just, I notice this, it's not good or bad. Like, taking away that judgment, I think, takes time, but it's so important to like
Mhm.
really embrace the emotional side of yourself, because it's real. Everyone has emotions, whether they acknowledge them or not, whether they can name them or not. It's still affecting their life.
Mhm. Mhm. And it's like we're going to talk tomorrow night. Actually, I'm going to talk with Christy Helvig, who does career coaching. We're going to talk more about mindfulness in the career space. And one of my little sneaky peeky, one of my takeaways from that is like emotions are your superpower. Like, especially like in the workforce, we're so conditioned to like just don't, especially as women. I think we've been trained like you better
Mhm.
show up without those emotions because otherwise, you're being too female or whatever. That's your superpower. Like, listen to it. It doesn't mean you have to have that drive your behavior. It doesn't mean because you feel angry, you smash stuff and you yell at people. That's probably not going to be real helpful. But if you feel anger, like there's some conflict there. So for goodness sakes, like notice it,
Yeah.
take off the judgment of like, I got to make this change because that's usually where the brain goes. This is uncomfortable. I can't stand it. Get rid of it. But like, why do you feel angry? Maybe somebody's
Mhm.
not respecting you. Maybe your values aren't showing up. Maybe your company isn't really well aligned with what's important to you personally. And that's good information to pay attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It is a superpower if, when you can channel it. Just like, I have two boys, so I've watched all the superhero movies, and it usually starts with them trying to figure out their power, and it's like all over, and then they have to channel it. Same
Mhm,
with emotions.
mhm.
Mindfulness and authenticity, like, together allow you to channel that superpower and to really use it. In fact, I work with a lot of high level women in management positions or high level businesses, and when they are healthy and can channel their emotions, they're actually super impactful and powerful to the people below them because of their emotional intelligence, and they can read and
Yep,
what their team needs. And it's just so powerful. And men too, like men who are super healthy with their emotions, super powerful in
right.
the business world, let alone your personal world. Like, come on, your partners, your families, like, they all need that
Absolutely.
look at emotions, because it's just so real.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So let's talk some more about that then. What do you think are some ways that people can use mindfulness or even outside of mindfulness to really like stay connected and authentic?
Yeah, I do think they go hand in hand. I remember when you asked me, like, hey, come up with some, like, a few points. I was like trying to make it so deep and intense, but I was like, actually, it's really simple, but it's like the practice of it. And I feel like, and now I feel like I've lost your question already. Where you just said,
I was just asking like some tips that
oh
or
yeah,
some ways to connect. Yeah.
yeah. So I do feel like just acknowledging, and my first tip was like allowing space, like just setting that intention that, emotions, mindfulness, authenticity, I'm going to set a space for that. And I'm going to dive into that and just be aware that I want that in my life
Mhm.
and why is it important. So just kind of setting that intention, I think, um, is huge,
Mhm.
because sometimes, I mean, the opposite of mindful is just going on auto drive, and like, you're like, what just happened? So slowing down to set an intention is
Yeah.
actually like creating that. So I feel like that is my first tip.
Mhm.
And then I put without judgment as my second tip, because that's where most people, that's where I get caught up. That's where
Yeah.
most people get caught up, is again, noticing when you're allowing space for it, what are the subconscious or the negative thoughts that you barely even notice coming into play with that? Are you saying, oh, I'm noticing it and that's bad? Like, I'm noticing that I have anger and anger is bad. Right. Or I notice that I have anxiety and anxiety is bad. Instead, it's more like the without judgment part would be like, oh, I notice I'm having anger. That's interesting. What's going on here? Like anger, I love, actually, anger for me is, sure, it used to be a red flag, but now it's actually super beneficial to me because I know my boundaries have been crossed, and that is either someone infringing on my boundaries or I need to rein them in. And it's been super helpful for me to say, if I'm sitting here resentful and angry, that's actually a time to come back to my values. What values are being crossed and what values do I need more boundaries? And it's usually it's usually me needing better boundaries in my life and communicating that to others. And
that's the piece right there. It's articulating it, because if other people don't know where your boundaries are, like you can't really fault them for it's like if you don't put a fence up and you want the cows to stay in the field and they don't stay in the field, well, you didn't put the fence there. So
and there's grass, so they're going to eat it.
Yeah, you eat it, right? Yeah,
it's not on
you
that.
make your grass way too available, and you didn't put up a fence.
And so to me, my anger is that's my sign to slow down, and then it's usually I'm angry at everyone. So the common denominator is actually me. And that's when I'm like, oh, my boundaries are way out of whack.
Yeah.
What am I doing? And so it's noticing that. But if I was judging it, I would stuff the anger. I would, which then I would explode more later. Right. And so noticing without judgment allows me to get curious. And then it allows me to communicate in a healthy way and get what I need. And then it actually helps the other person too, because then it's a great and then it's more authentic community. It's authentic connections because you're both really talking about what's important to you and how you impact one another. And that's authentic community, in my opinion.
Right.
So it does go hand in hand.
Power in adding on to without judgment when we can separate the judging mind, and it's hard to turn it off, but even just notice it, let it be a different channel, and decide not to get attached to those judgments. But when we can do that, when we let go of the outcome piece, the judging mind is usually there's some outcome I want, and it's getting farther away from me, right? Because we're going in a different direction. When we can come back to right now and let go of that piece as well, then you can just also in relationship, you can just be curious about the other person's perspective. And then it's almost you don't even need to be angry anymore. Cause it's we're just two people traveling on this earth. We can hear each other out. We can decide where the lines are between us. We can articulate that and, great.
Yeah. I feel it gives more, choice in the matter, because when you're not noticing and you're judging, you're keeping it really inside and internal, and it's revving you up. But when you notice something and you're mindful and you're allowing space for that without judgment, means you take it out here and you look at it and you're like, oh, I noticed that, and now what do I do? It gives you power, it gives you choice. And to me, it's you take back the control, even though
it buys you time.
Yes,
right?
Yes, it totally buys you time. Yes.
If I'm just being curious, I can say wow, that's a really interesting perspective. I really need to think about that and how that sits with me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Isn't that better than popping off and exploding at somebody? Right?
Yeah, totally. And fill in the blank with anger, with anxiety. People are no, anxiety is not okay. But actually, to me, think about it. If you look at the same physical feelings of anxiety, sometimes I used to run track in high school, and when I went to a counselor once, he explained anxiety to me. When else have you felt really heightened and ready to go? And I'm oh, right before the gun goes off on the track meet. And he's what do you do then? I'm well, I focus it and run really fast. And he's do that with other anxiety. I was oh, and so it took the power away from anxiety's bad to how can I channel it? It's telling me something about my body. It's telling me about how I work. It's telling me it's like flags. It's telling you different directions.
Right. And once we kind of take it out here and look at it, then we can say, okay, is this anxiety I'm feeling right now, or this anger, or this whatever feeling?
Yeah.
Is that based on my current situation? Or is that like the conceptual brain that's taken like past experience and like like plopped it on to this new ambiguous situation? Because as much as we don't enjoy probably feeling angry, resentful, scared, anxious, we know what to do with it, right? Like,
Yeah.
here's what I do in this situation. The situation looks a little bit similar. My brain fires up like the program essentially,
Yeah.
and then I can run through it, as opposed to, wait, maybe this situation is really different than any situation I've been in before. And it
And
most
I
likely is, right?
Yeah, and I feel like that's a definition of authenticity too. Like what's really going on here? Like what's the real situation? Like let's bring truth into this. To me, truth and authentic are very similar. Like let's talk about what's real and what's perceived. Like that's what I heard you say. And to me, I was like, oh, that's authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And our brain, like, I always think about like how much information like we have to sort through constantly. And our
Oh yeah.
brain is really good at concept formation and making fast judgments.
Oh
And
yeah.
most of the time they're probably helpful, but sometimes they're not.
Yeah. And that's the brain's job, right? Make
Mhm.
judgments and it has to connect to a story so that it calms down. But like sometimes our stories are jacked up. They're not real. They're not authentic. And we have to allow curiosity to pull us back to
Mhm.
what is real, or we're just going to go on autopilot, which is not mindful.
Exactly. So, which probably is a good segue into your next kind of tip area. How
Yeah.
does self-compassion come into this?
Yeah, self-compassion is my third tip. I feel like it is crucial. It goes right with the other two. I kind of like put them in like a hierarchy of what you have to do first, second, and third. And
Mhm.
so self-compassion is just when you do notice, in order to not have judgment, you need to have space to be like, okay, I'm human. This
Mhm.
is a part of life. I'm not alone in this. Like this is, I'm going to have compassion for myself. I think we're better at compassion for other people,
Oh yeah.
and I mean, I was just talking with a client yesterday about it, like turning that intense compassion to yourself. And it's usually so uncomfortable for us, but you have to do it. Like
Yeah.
you have to allow human space to just say, this is a part of life. And take a breath. May I be compassionate to
Yeah.
myself?
I went to well, we talked about this on your podcast when you interviewed me. I went to a silent retreat, and I remember we were talking about that. Um, one of the things the retreat leader talked about, like, I don't know if I'd call it inner child work, but she did talk a lot about like recognizing that whoever, if you can be compassionate to a child, right? You were
Yes.
once that child, and something like a practice that I took from that is I now have a picture of myself when I was about 8 years old on my desk. And
I
she's
love that.
me and her, it's like a great 1970s selfie probably. I'm sure it was a selfie because it's like totally out of whack and I'm on the beach and it's like bleached out
There's
from,
no filters in the
no
70s.
filters in the 70s.
It's
Yeah.
like
It was
real
real
selfie.
film. The photographic paper is faded, but like I'm like unbleached blonde and missing teeth and just happy. And I'm like, you got to be nice to her because like that was a good kid right there, right?
Yeah. And I do that with clients too. I say like, bring in a picture of when you were this age, when this experience happened, so we can get like a real view of what you're talking about here.
Yeah.
But yeah, but for ourselves, like I do this exercise with people. I do it when I talk. I do it with people, and 90% of the time people like start sobbing, and it's a self-compassion. And I got it actually from Kristen Neff. She's
Mhm.
like one of the big
Yep.
people on self-compassion. And so I kind of modified it for myself, but it's like holding open hands and saying, this is a moment of failure or whatever, or anxiety or anything you're feeling of doubt.
Mhm.
Um, Doubt is common to human life. I'm not alone in this. And then and this is when everyone cries, is you put your hands on your heart, you take a deep breath and say, may I be kind, or may I have self-compassion? And that, like, people weep.
Oh yeah.
And it's powerful. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But it's funny because I'm like teaching it. But then when I do it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I need self-compassion. Like it's so I cry. So it's like a huge
Yep.
thing of turning it towards yourself and allowing that kindness. We're so hard on ourselves.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's authentic. Like the authenticity is not, I got to hustle and be perfect and be better. That's not authentic. That's not life.
Yeah, and
Self-compassion.
even recognizing that the part of us that's hard on ourselves is also just a part that's striving, right? Like
Yes.
striving to be better, and that's also human.
Yeah.
Maybe it's misdirected and misguided at times, but it's very human.
Yeah. I notice I like to strive for perfection. I'm just going to notice that. I'm not going to judge that either. That's just part of my personality. So how am I going to integrate that into noticing without judgment and some self-compassion there too? Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's like taking all this judgment and shame away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what's your last tip here?
Yes, my last one is finding your people who can allow you to do this with them, because not everyone is going to get this. And like if you are struggling, there are times you can't get out of your head. There are times you can't be self-compassionate. You're too far gone. This is when you need to reach out to your people who can journey alongside you, who can be authentic with you, who know mindfulness, who know what you want and value, and can say, "Oh no, that don't don't beat yourself up." Like just kind of allow you to go through your cycle and process and help you notice rather than saying, well, like pull yourself up by the bootstraps, or just like hustle and like push through that and like just ignore it, or you're doing great. You really need people in your life, and it could be one or it could be two or three, but like you need to find your people and kind of protect that and know when I'm having a bad headspace day, when I'm being judgmental, when I'm not mindful, who are the people I can connect with that will bring me back to reality. And to me, that's authentic community. I love the word. It's like my favorite, authentic. And bringing people into that circle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's so much there that I would make note of, like so many things as you're talking that I want to keep talking about. Like I definitely think those people that you can truly be you, and part of what we're asking hopefully from those people is the same thing that hopefully we're providing to ourselves. So these are the people that are judgment free, right?
Yes.
That I can just be who I am, without worrying about judgment. And I do like that. That is really important. And there's going to be some friends and colleagues and connections who are going to do that. And there's going to be some that like they're on their own path and their own journey, and they might not be able to do that. And it doesn't mean you have to shut them out of your life, but like knowing, who's where basically, who's supporting you, and who are those people that you can really, be yourself and really turn to, when you need that support is so huge.
Yeah. And there's times in your life where, I mean, I feel like life is like a roller coaster, right? And like there are times where you can be that for someone too. And there's times you can't. And that person might come around like a year later and be that person. But you have to be very aware and mindful of like who the people are pouring into your life versus who's sucking the life out of you versus like where you're at. Again, it's mindful of where you're at, where they're at, and just, kind of allowing that. And I think it's funny, Kim, because I remember the first, when we met, it was, I don't know how many years ago. Feels like 10. What?
Don and I used to have offices down the hall from each other. So,
and somehow we met, and I think because we had this like common little kitchen area that we'd go for like get some drinks and lunch and in the middle of in between sessions. I just remember talking to you and just really like certain people, and we weren't good friends then. That's when we started our friendship, but we like could like dive deep really quick and then be like, we got a session. So it was like 2 minutes and then back out, and like it was still refreshing. And it was like, you could be one of my people. And then 10 years later.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's so much to talk about here. There's like the whole idea of like this hustle culture, and like I hate that. Like I did something at some point, some writing that I wrote about like leave the hustle in the back alley or leave the hustle in the 70s or something. Like, like it just sounds shady. Like I don't want to hustle. Like I want to show up joyfully and do what I feel called to do. And if I'm doing that, like there shouldn't be a hustle. Like hustle to me suggests like you're like manipulating people to get them to like buy your thing or whatever, and just that's taking away the judgment too. Like I can put it out there without the fear of like what's going to happen next, like what outcome is going to come from it. So.
Yeah. And the last few weeks, Kim, this has been hitting home with me. I've been reading this book, I had COVID for like 2 or 3 weeks, it forced me to slow down, and it forced me to look at my life and my business and everything. It was like literally a spiritual experience for me. But I was reading this book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And he has all this research in the first chapter on how hurry and being busy actually detracts from relationship. It detracts from your spirituality. And it's not like the antithesis. It's the antithesis of relationship and connection. And I was like, that is so true. And anyway, so I've just been really looking at it. I'm like, I feel like it's very, and he talks about mindfulness in there. It's very
down.
like,
The ruthless elimination of hurry.
Yes. And it's definitely it's definitely more of a Christian book based on spirituality, connecting with God. But there's another book. One of my mentors, Joe Sanak, wrote a book, Thursday is the New Friday. And he does the same thing. He's talking about we should be working less to be more productive. Like we need to have less work days, not more. And how when you slow down, you actually are better.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's so many books out there right now about it.
I have a piece in here, an essay in here that I think is called Getting Unbusy. Like the whole culture of busy and asking ourselves, like, what are we communicating by being busy, and what does that need? Like, is that authentically who you are, that you like, I don't know, competition is a piece of it, like one-upping others can be a piece of it. Or if it's truly like you're so busy and harried, like maybe back it up and reprioritize, because not gonna, like, our brain is not a computer that runs on multiple windows open at the same time. We can do it, but we don't do it very well.
Yeah. And I feel like for me and my family, that's what COVID did to us when we all shut down for months. And then when things started opening back up, and all of a sudden, like, we got all these invitations for parties and like sporting events and everything's open. And we just like started like physically and emotionally, like, this is not okay, but this is how we lived.
Yeah.
And I was like, we had an excuse to say no before. Now we have to like own it. Again, speaking of being authentic, own your crap and like say no.
And back to the cows wandering, like set the boundary, going to, 5 parties on a weekend for my kids, and then dinner parties for, the grown-ups. Like, I'm not going to feel good on Monday. So
I need some downtime to just chill and not do anything. And that's countercultural right now. Like, it's hard, and you have to say no to parties, and you have to say no maybe to events, and not do everything 100%.
Yeah. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, and my tips, I mean, we've talked about all this. No, you're fine. I think like these are the same as yours, just different wording, like stilling the body and mind to listen. So really getting intentional about quieting and being present. And maybe some of that is, it's the stepping, half step back to be that observing self of what your experience is. Turn towards uncomfortable emotions with curiosity. So, notice that it's there, and then be curious about why it showed up for you, and then use those emotional experiences to understand your value system. If I were to add a fourth one, it's then activate your behavior choices and your skills to like align your behavior with your values. Like, how do you act in a values aligned manner?
Yeah, I love the third one. I feel like we could do like a whole nother 30 minutes on that one alone.
Maybe we'll someday. Well, on that note too, we are coming up on the end of our 30 minutes. So Dawn, how can people connect with you?
Yeah, I am on Facebook, Faith Fringes. You can get my website, faithfringes.com. You can email me, dawn@faithfringes.com. I'm also on Facebook, Pinterest, LinkedIn. Find me, or my counseling center, Authentic Connections counselingcenter.com, or authenticcounseling.com. So you can find me all over.
Yeah. And if people are looking to connect with me, best way is probably my website, drkimdwyer.com. My Facebook page is Intentional Private Practice. I'm on LinkedIn and other stuff too, but the website has all that on there. And then just one more. If you're looking for more, check out Mindful Mondays. You can order it through Amazon, I believe also through Barnes & Noble, and it is now shipping out. So thank you all for joining us, Dawn. Thank you so much for being here tonight. It's so fun.
It was so fun. Thanks, Kim, for having me.
All right. Have a good night.